Hello and welcome to Trad Jazz Today. Dan Zeilinger has been a world-traveling trad jazz musician for the past 40 years. Some of his most memorable performances were on the lawn of the Edinburgh Castle, at the Imperial Palace in Japan, as well as TV shows and commercials around the world. Dan has met many people during his career and has spent many hours on and off stage with these musicians, talking about jazz, life, and more. Some are touring musicians, some are theme park warriors, and some are casual musicians who play on weekends with their friends. They all have stories worthy of a movie script, and through these interviews, Dan will be sharing them with you. Now, Dan Zeilinger.
All right. Hi there, this is Dan Zeilinger with Trad Jazz Today. It seems I always start these introductions with a giggle, and that's just because I'm silly, I think. I'm not sure. My next guest is somebody who I had a chance to meet probably about maybe a little bit less than a year ago now. She was playing with Conrad Kamen and the Big Brother Jazz Band, and I was just so blown away by her chops. I've been wanting to meet her and actually get to know who she is, and it's Miss Barbara Laronga. Did I say that right?
You did. Thank you, Dan.
With somebody who has Zeilinger for a last name, you try to get other people's correctly, you know?
Yeah, you did it right. Thank you.
Is that, pardon me, I know this isn't politically correct, but is that Italian derivation?
Yep, it is.
Okay. I don't look like a German boy either. What can I say, you know? But it's true. I'm half German, half Filipino.
Oh, cool.
Which would only be funny if it didn't sound like a German Pinot didn't sound like a venereal disease. Anyway. Digest. So is it true that you were born in Massachusetts?
Yes.
An East Coast girl.
I'm an East Coast girl and was in Massachusetts until I think I was around 30, maybe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. When did you start playing music? Was trumpet your first instrument?
Trumpet was not my first instrument. I started on piano. We had an old upright piano in our house, and I started piano lessons, I think, when I was in first grade. And
Lucky.
I had a, you know, what was to me an ancient piano teacher in that time. His name was Mr. LaCroix, and I'll never forget him because he was really old school. And he hit my hand one day with a ruler because I made a mistake. And that was the same day that I told my parents that I no longer wanted to take piano lessons.
Aha. I ask about that on a lot of my interviews.
Yeah. And I never stopped playing that piano, though. I loved it. I loved the way it sounded. I was attracted to it. And, you know, of course, I still to this day have all kinds of wacky fingerings I use on piano. But I started on piano, and then I picked up the trumpet. We had a great music education program where I went to school. And so at the end of third grade, they came around with a big demonstration of all the instruments. And they went through all of them, and I'm pretty sure that the last one that they played was the trumpet. And the fellow who had demonstrated all the other brass instruments was obviously a trumpet player, because when he picked up the trumpet, he just started soaring on it. And I was so attracted to it. You know, I picked the trumpet. Everybody in my school, not everybody, but I want to say most kids, it wasn't really a question of whether or not they wanted to do music. It was, which instrument do you want to play? So that whole, you know, the good education system that supported music and arts was really important, I think, to my survival as a musician. And so we were encouraged.
So you actually got to start playing in fourth grade or third grade?
I started playing technically in fourth grade. I was 8 years old. And we had group trumpet lessons during school in fourth grade.
The reason I asked is out here on the West Coast, we weren't allowed to start wind instruments until fifth. You could start strings in fourth, but not wind instruments. So.
Yeah, we didn't have a big string program. I was in a small town. Maybe they felt like they couldn't support both. So, but yeah, we had a band. I believe the elementary school band was for fifth and sixth graders. So the fourth graders were taking lessons, and then as soon as we got into fifth grade, we started band, and it was fantastic.
You had your fill of hot cross buns and
all of it.
All that good stuff, which just out of curiosity, you may not remember, but as an educator, I'm sort of curious, as to which book did you start in?
You know what? I can't remember.
Yeah, because sometimes it's the Brubeck, sometimes it's other things.
I tried to remember and I tried to find it, and I can't. I just couldn't find it.
I was just curious. Eventually, we all end up on the Arbins and the Clarks, but that's beside the point. You know.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, we started. We did have a book. I remember we had a book, and then my first solo ever was in that elementary school band, and it was on an arrangement called Blue Rock, and it went ba 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 da. Ba 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 da. Ba 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 ba.
Ah, 12 Bar Blues.
Yeah, it was a blues, and I was probably the only one who could hit the high E flat, which is why they gave it to me, I'm sure. But I love music. I had great band directors and trumpet teachers throughout my entire career, so I'm really fortunate in that area.
That's interesting. You know, in junior high, I remember we had a song called Fidgets.
Yep.
And it was basically just the bass line to In the Mood. There's another 12 Bar Blues, obviously, but
Yep.
it was unison. Ba, da, 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 da.
Oh yeah.
But however, it did get a blues stuck in my head. So, you know, that's some pivotal stuff, actually.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool.
Totally.
Now, you're being an East Coaster and being from Massachusetts, I have to ask you the next question. I'm obligated to by contract. Did you ever get stuck in the drum and bugle corps?
I actually did not. I did not even learn about drum and bugle corps, thankfully, until I was in college and I met another student who was doing drum and bugle corps, and his this was also a blessing in disguise, but his chops were a mess. And you know, this has nothing to do with drum and bugle corps, but
it actually probably does, but that's beside the point.
Well, yeah, in my mind at the time, I had equated it to, well, that's because you're trying to march and play the trumpet. You know, it's just those two don't go hand in hand. You know, but of course it doesn't. If you have proper technique, you can get it done. It's still not 100%, but you know, you have to have good marching technique, and you can play.
I was asking. I came out of drum corps. My son actually did as well, and he's now the director of drum corps. But when you say you're from Massachusetts and you play trumpet, it's almost impossible to avoid it, I would think, at some level.
I guess it was really just the circles I was in, and
That's
maybe
fine.
what my educators were focused on. I would imagine that if they were big drum and bugle corps people, big drum corps people, that they would have sort of pushed me in that direction, like, hey, you could get with a good outfit, why don't you go audition and see what happens. But they were more geared toward I had some really great teachers. They were teaching me all kinds of classical concertos, as well as jazz improvisation and lead playing and everything. And
how old were you when you started improvisation?
I started improvisation probably when I was a freshman in high school, but I got a real quote unquote jazz teacher when I think I was a junior in high school. So a little bit late actually compared to some of the kids now. But I just want to give a shout out to my high school band director named Al Menino, who was also my trumpet teacher at the time. Really dedicated to education and music education. And he gave me such a solid foundation as far as just being a good technical trumpet player.
Well, you've got killer chops, so kudos to him.
Yeah, kudos to him. He really taught me the technique of what's happening with your chops and your air, and the other teacher I had too, the teacher that was teaching me about lead playing, also had a lot of great things to say about air. And he was a great oral teacher. He would play for me, and I was able to imitate him. I guess that means I'm a good oral learner. When I hear somebody do it, I can attach it to what I'm supposed to do on the trumpet. But that combination of the two of them really, I think, is what gave me the physical foundation to learn what it means to play the trumpet. So Al Menino, he used to, for all the trumpet geeks out there, he used to take me in the Arbins book, right? And page 44, I believe it is.
Right.
Well, starting on page 41.
Where it goes through the key changes.
No. Sorry, 144, 142.
Oh, okay.
142, 144. This is like the lip flexibility, the lip trill section, right? Did I say 44? I meant
Yeah, you said 44. I'm sorry.
It's 141 to 144 or so. And he taught me how to do that with as little pressure as possible. Like that was his whole thing. Like if you can do this with as little pressure as possible, your tongue level is going to be acting correctly. Your air is going to be acting correctly. Your chops are going to know what kind of support they need to support those notes that you're playing. And so we went all the way up to I believe it goes to high G for the trill in the Arbenz book. And then my other teacher taught me about Walter Smith. And Walter Smith actually took that same Arbenz exercise and he took it into the upper register. And literally that's how I learned to do the lip trill, which is, can be, some people call it a shake.
Right.
But that's really what Louis does all the time.
Right.
Talking about trad jazz, like that's what Louis was doing all the time. And you could hear, the way that he does it really stems from that same principle of the tongue level, inside the mouth.
And you were so lucky to have brass players as teachers.
I was.
There's nothing like hearing brass players who didn't, and they have no clue when it has to do with the syllabic and the tongue placement.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a. In fact, I'm on a discussion group of band directors and things, and it drives me crazy when they say, I can't figure out how to get my kid to play anything but a second line G. Anyway, sorry, I rant.
Just can I make another plug here? This
Please.
Is not political or COVID related, but if anyone needs to learn about air, and there's a really great master class series that Lincoln Center put out actually with James Morrison. And James Morrison really talks about air and how to use that air regarding range. So the tongue level thing coupled with the air thing, all students are going to be in great shape if they have those concepts. It's
interesting. He is such a phenomenal player. A lot of people, unfortunately, he made the talk show circuits in Australia, I think it was, about cracking walnuts with his chops. And so he doesn't. Have you seen those cuts?
I didn't see it yet.
Oh, well, no, they're pretty old. But he used to go on talk shows and things. He would take a walnut and crush it with his chops, not using any teeth.
Wow.
And so he didn't get. What I'm saying is, people don't give him the credit for air and tongue placement. Yeah. And anyway, I digress. As you can probably tell, I started out as a trumpet player.
Yeah.
And I make my living now as a tuba player. But oh well, some of us go to the dark side,
I dabbled in sousaphone once. That was it. One day.
I just went where the money was, and growing up here in Southern California, great lead trumpet players abound, as you well know now, and it was easy for me to make a buck on tuba. Is what it came down to.
Mm-hmm.
So let's hear it for money.
Yes, hey, it's great when you can make a living as a performer.
Now, how old were you when? Let me rephrase this question now that I hear it coming out of my mouth. Was classic jazz with the Louis Armstrong, Vic Beiderbecke stuff the first thing that influenced you jazz-wise, or were you listening to more modern stuff originally?
That's a good question. I was listening to more modern stuff. I had 1, 2, let me count here. Right now I can only remember 2. I had 2 jazz records. I grew up back in the day of vinyl, so that dates myself, but I'm okay with it. I had 2 jazz albums, and they were a Maynard Ferguson album and a Chuck Mangione double album that he made with his brother Gap, and it was all bebop. It wasn't his flugelhorn stuff. It wasn't Feel So Good. It was all bebop. And so I had a lead player album and I had a bebop album. And I just think that I had heard those 2 names, and that's what made me buy those albums. I had no idea what I was buying. Little did I know that later I would meet Chuck Mangione's, actually not, sorry, Pat Metheny's brother, Mike Metheny. I met Mike Metheny, and he said, "I'm going to play something for you." I was at a summer music camp at the University of New Hampshire. And he said, "I'm going to play something for you, and I want you to tell me who you think it can be." Now, this is long after Chuck Mangione was a famous flugelhorn player. And he dropped the needle on that same record that I had grown up with. And it was just straight bebop, Chuck Mangione with his brother Gap. And I said, "That's Chuck Mangione." And I think I blew his socks right off of him. He couldn't believe that I knew. But really, the only reason that I knew was because I had that record. So it was kind of a good thing. So I had those two records. And I also was attracted to rock and roll at the time. And so I had horn player records, this was actually,
Bill Chase.
I had a little bit of Chase. I don't think I had records, but I knew who they were and I knew about their tunes. And, but I did have Tower of Power records.
Sure. Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and Earth, Wind, and Fire. I had those three bands, and I burned holes in those records, I'm pretty sure. I just loved them, and I was really attracted to that type of playing as well. So,
yeah,
that's what I had back then. And then, the collection started growing from there.
Now, have you heard the early Maynard stuff, where he wasn't just playing triple G's and then taking credit for it?
Oh, yeah,
because he was such a tasty jazz player.
Absolutely, yeah, unbelievable.
I just thought I'd ask. I had a bunch of those albums, and I loaned them to a student, and never saw them again.
Oh, students, bring back the records and the books.
We all know how that goes.
You don't have to worry about the records anymore. Actually, and all the books are pretty much online too now for free. So
I know, it's a wonderful thing. Maybe you can relate to this, but as a teacher, it drives me crazy. When we were coming up, let's talk about, I'm an old guy. It was to get to listen to wonderful recordings, you had to go down to the record store and go through the used bin and find this stuff and borrow it from your friends and have them make cassette tapes of the stuff they had. And now it's all out there. It's all out there on the internet. And I still can't get my students to listen.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? It's a really strange phenomenon that happens, isn't it? I have the same experience with my students.
And
they don't have the experience of how difficult it is.
Well, it's the only way to get better.
Yeah, I don't mean to make excuses for them, but I get it because I know that they're distracted because they've grown up with 24 hours worth of distractions. So for them to actually be patient and search for something, I think they need to sort of grow into that and realize what's at their fingertips. I think they will. They eventually get there.
Yeah. A generation who doesn't know what a test pattern is on a TV set.
Wow. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're right. They don't do that anymore. We get a ticker tape now, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy, I tell you. Boy, do I sound old or what?
That's all right. I understand everything you're talking about.
I wasn't going to say that. So tell me about your high school band.
My high school
and
band,
that experience.
Again, this was Al Menino. I had some, so there was another great conductor there. His name was Roger Lund, and he was there when I was in junior high school. And I actually auditioned for the high school band when I was in 8th grade, probably due to his recommendation. And I went in and I won first chair, which is not a great way to make friends with the high school students who are all older than you and all guys. Whew, that was something to get over, but you know what? They were all cool with me.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question that's going to piss me off. But how old were you when you had your first high C?
I was probably 7th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. I tried to play high notes when I was younger. I wanted to play high notes, so I tried.
Well, my generation, you had to. If you weren't Maynard Ferguson, you weren't anybody,
Yeah. If there is a little bit of a concept that a space between your front two teeth aids with high note playing.
Ah, yes.
There's mine. It's right there. So, yeah.
Yeah, I had a very similar smile when I was younger.
Hmm.
Uh, Not quite so similar anymore, but that's a long story we don't need to get into because I'm a tuba player now. But yeah, even my son, who is produces the show for me, also played trumpet, and he had a big gap. His senior in high school, he had a double F, and
Yeah.
then his mom put braces on him.
Oh, mom.
Yeah, what can I say?
You know, I had a double G in high school,
Oof.
but it wasn't consistent. I mean, to be consistent at that, you really need crazy chops. But I could hit it,
Yeah,
and I could hit it, most of the time unless I was tired. Um, and I think that that had to do with the gap. Plus, I practiced all the time. I really probably had the best practice habits when I was in high school, junior high and high school, more than any other time in my career, if you can believe that.
I can't believe it, but that's okay. I believe you.
Yeah,
Let's geek out a little bit here.
sure.
Do you play a pucker embouchure?
Uh,
Is it a protrusion or is it a pullback?
it's neither.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, it's just I have just the support of the buccinators and the zygomatics and the orator muscle all are just contracted, but I don't make any point to protrude my embouchure, nor do I pull back. In fact, I think that in my experience, I think that pulling back actually hinders abilities.
Oh, absolutely, and it affects endurance.
Yeah, I don't really know anything about the puckering thing, but I don't do that.
Well, Maggio was the big proponent of that,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
I just thought I'd ask
Yeah.
since I'm a trumpet geek by nature.
Yeah.
Interesting. Boy, like I said, you were. I guess luck is maybe not the right word, but you were so fortunate to have such good teachers early on.
Yeah.
I remember one of the times I was clinicking at a high school. I was going down the trombone section asking for a tuning note, and but cream. Do that again. Cream. Can I see your horn? Had no cork in the spit valve.
Oh yeah.
Freshman in high school. I said, you don't have a cork in your spit valve. She goes, it's always been that way
Oh no, poor
since
thing.
fifth grade.
Ugh,
So that's why I said you're fortunate.
I am, and I know I am, so it's good.
Okay, so you went from high school. Where did you first go to college?
I went to college at the University of Massachusetts in Lowell. At the time, it was actually called U Lowell, but they changed the name. UMass, yeah, I guess bought them, and so now it's called the University of Massachusetts at Lowell. And I had a double major. Actually, I was a trumpet performance major and a music business major.
Oh,
And that was an interesting sort of landscape there. I had a good experience. I ended up taking the wrong classes and was the reason for me doubling my major because I realized I was going to be there longer than I had wanted to. And so I just said, well, I'm here. Let me just double this up and learn about these other classes because now I have time so that everything sort of overlapped. But I'm really, really glad that I did that because it's been proven to be invaluable.
oh, absolutely.
Music business area. So
I think that's probably one of the biggest downfalls of most musicians
absolutely, 100%.
is not
Yep.
understanding that business is a bigger word.
Yep. True.
Cool.
Yeah.
And okay, now I don't know how much time I'm skipping here, but then you ended up at some point or another in the Diva big band.
Yeah, that's a big time skip.
Okay, let's fill in the gap.
I'll fill in the gap. Okay, so when I was done with UMass, I actually stayed in the Boston area for a number of years, and I was playing gigs there, and that's actually where I learned about trad jazz.
Ah,
I actually learned about trad. I know who Louis Armstrong was, and I knew who a bunch of the other New Orleans trumpet players were, and Bix Beiderbecke, of course. But I hadn't really delved into that music. I was playing mostly big band gigs. I was playing a lot of funk and pop and wedding bands and
Brecker Brothers.
Brecker Brothers. No, yeah, Brecker Brothers and cover bands. Lots of clubs. You know, Boston has a great college scene, so there's always a lot of clubs, a lot of parties, a lot of spring carnivals, and I was doing really well. I had tons of private students during the day at different area high schools, and I would gig at night. And then I answered an ad one day that was looking for a trumpet player for their New Orleans style band. And I went to this audition after having prepared two Louis Armstrong solos that they specifically requested.
What were they? Just out of curiosity.
One was Strutting with Some Barbecue,
Okay.
and the other was I can't remember. Maybe it was only one, but when I got up on stage, they asked me to stay for another one.
Ah,
I knew that was a good sign, so I figured I better just keep playing in the style of Louis and see if I can land this gig. And they liked it, and they hired me, and so I played with them for a number of years, and they were all about learning as much repertoire as we could. So of
was
course,
that who was that band?
the band was called Made in the Shade, and yeah, so we learned a lot of repertoire, tons and tons of repertoire. Their whole thing was New Orleans music, so we did everything. We did everything from second line to Louis stuff to trad jazz stuff. We even did like Thelonious Monk tunes with a trad jazz feel and instrumentation. Of course, we had a tuba player, banjo, a drummer, and then the three front horns, trumpet. We had a soprano sax player and trombone.
Mm-hmm.
And from there I started my own New Orleans trio called the Bayou Bump, and that was just me, banjo, and sousaphone. And so
That's all you really need.
that's all you really need. And I used to record tunes like Hotter Than That and
Sure.
Louis stuff, and I wanted it to be more just trad jazz, but but so I literally fell in love with the music, and I started researching it more, and I started really knowing which artists I liked the best, what trumpet players I liked the best, what style I liked the best. I learned about there was apparent racism in the trad jazz community
Oh,
that I
I'm
couldn't
shocked. I'm
stand.
sorry.
I know. I had no idea. I mean, I was young and I was oblivious to the ways of the world in that way because my immediate community was not about that. And so we did a trad jazz festival in Aberdeen, Washington.
Oh my,
The,
yes.
the
I've
Rain
been
or
I've been
Shine,
to that one.
the Rain or Shine Dixieland Jazz Festival, and I saw this fella who had a pin on that I can't remember exactly what it said, but it basically said "End racism in trad jazz" or something like that. And so I asked him about it because I didn't know anything about it, and he said, "Oh yeah, look around. Do you see any black people here?" And I said no, and so that made me think, and you know, it's important that we acknowledge that.
Sure.
And so the band that I started in, like I said, we focused on New Orleans music, and most of the players that we were focused on were black musicians. Louis and all of those other players from then that really were the founding fathers and mothers. Lil Hardin Armstrong
Oh yeah.
was awesome, and all of these players that just contributed so much. So I feel like it's important to acknowledge that that's where it came from.
Well,
And
I agree, first of all.
thanks.
Second of all, there was a big battle for a long time with some certain aspects of the community. Oh, think about it. Actually, it was the original Dixieland Jazz Band. Of course, we were a bunch of Italians that used to argue that Dixieland actually came out of the Ozarks, uh, and it was a big historical push to try to. I mean, there was a racist push to try and rewrite history, having to do
Yeah.
with how jazz was came about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit disconcerting, and let's try to set that record straight.
Well, all you have to do is listen to original Dixieland one step, first recording, and you realize that they weren't swinging. Anyway.
That's right. Yeah. There's that.
There's that.
Yeah.
So
That's a great point.
you finally heard the trad line. You know, as a once again as a young trumpet player, my parents were always setting me in front of the TV set when Louis came on, any of the variety shows, and I didn't get it. As a young trumpet player who was listening to Maynard and listening to Maurice Andre, I'd listen to Louis and just go, so the guy cracks notes. You know, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
And I really think it takes maturity to appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know listening to you, it was obvious how much
Mistake
energy
I made.
I know it's obvious how much energy you put into listening to the style and understanding how it's presented. I've played with a lot of trumpet players who come from a modern ilk who still don't get it. They have great chops and they can play all over the horn, but they don't understand. I guess that's what they aren't blind, but they can't see. I'm sure there's a million euphemisms in there somewhere.
Yeah, you know, I should also give props to, again, back to Massachusetts, just the wonderful crew of musicians who were playing trad jazz when I was learning about it, because the new Black Eagle Jazz Band was there.
I've interviewed Eli.
Okay, I don't know Eli, but I used to play with, oh God, his name's going to escape me now, the clarinet player. I want to say Novak was his last name, but I'm not positive.
How do you like Tony Pringle?
I don't know who.
The traditional cornet player with Black Eagle.
Oh, he's fantastic. I forgot his name. Yeah, he's great. And then there's another guy that I wanted to mention, and I'm not sure if he was a member, but he certainly played with them. His name is Phil Persson. I don't know if you've ever interviewed Phil Persson, but Phil Persson played with Artie Shaw, among, he's got a plethora of just famous musicians that he's played with. But Phil really taught me a lot about Louis. He got me on that Artie Shaw band for one little short tour, and unfortunately the money situation for those ghost bands is horrendous at best, and so it wasn't really for me, but I enjoyed playing with Phil so much, and we played in Massachusetts so much. And Dick Johnson was the leader clarinet player who took on the role of Artie Shaw, and he had Phil come out and play What a Wonderful World with him. And now Phil would do this solo that was just, he played the same solo every night, which was unlike him. So I assumed that he had copied a Louis Armstrong solo, and that's what he was doing. So I asked him about it, and he said and taught me that Louis had never played a trumpet solo on What a Wonderful World ever. I did not know that until I met Phil. And the solo that he played sort of let me discover what a genius this guy was. I mean, he said he went and listened to a whole bunch of Louis stuff, specifically, that would have been based around those chord changes. And he said he came up with a solo that he thinks would be the closest to something like what Louis would play. Now, this solo that he came up with was so good. In my mind, it was a Louis Armstrong solo. So Phil Persson is just a name of note that I wanted to give props to, because I
don't know him. I will pay attention.
Oh yeah, you should definitely call Phil up. He'd probably love to talk to you, and he's got a wonderful career too. But that Massachusetts thing. So leading up to Diva, it was around the same time, or not that long after, that I fell in love with trad jazz, actually, that Diva. I had heard about Diva because I started studying some, I wanted to learn more about improv and get better at it. So I started studying with Charlie Bonakis and John McNeil. John McNeil is a trumpet teacher at New England Conservatory who almost broke into like superstardom in the jazz world. He was kind of like the Tom Harrell era.
Okay.
And he ended up having an issue with his health that sort of made it difficult for him to pursue everything, I think, in the way that Tom did. But John McNeil kept teaching at New England Conservatory, and just a phenomenal jazz improvisation teacher. And his wife, Lolly Bienenfeld, was playing lead trombone with Diva at the time. Fabulous trombone player, incredible lead trombone player, and used to play with Thad Jones' band, Thad Jones Mel Lewis band. And so they were coming to Boston. So they said, hey, why don't you go talk to Sherrie and meet Sherrie? She's the leader of the band, and tell him I sent you, and tell him if you ever need a sub to give you a call. So I did that. And the very first time I ever played with Diva, they sent the set list and they sent the music, and they said, here, learn all of this. And one of the songs was Swing That Music.
Ah.
And so I said, this is pretty cool. You know, it was a great arrangement. I believe it was by Scott Whitfield, who you probably know, an unbelievable trombone player who lived in New York for a long time, and now he's out in LA. And it starts off with trumpets in 4 parts playing the West End Blues intro.
Right.
And then it goes into Swing That Music. And so I thought, here's my opportunity to show them what I got, because I studied this Louis stuff, and they liked it. And literally, I'm pretty sure that song is why I kind of landed the gig with Diva. Anyways, so that was my introduction to Diva, and I've been a band member pretty much ever since, which is over, I think, pushing 25 years now. There was a little hiatus when I moved out to LA, but I decided I couldn't live without them, so we're back on it.
Excellent. It's got to be a blast to play.
It's amazing. It's the greatest musical sisterhood I've ever been involved with. There's just, not to mention, the most incredible musicians that I've ever played with have come through that band, but also the most beautiful people, and people who have similar, I don't want to say issues, but experiences that I do, being a woman in a mostly male-dominated industry, at least for jazz.
Yeah, it's true.
It's true. However, the tides are that it's doing this. It's creeping.
Yes.
So hopefully we'll get to the equality status as far as
Among my interviews, I also interviewed Cynthia Sayer,
Oh, yeah.
and quite a few other female musicians who were all out there battling for what's going on.
Yeah.
It's not like the old days where you have Inoria Hutton and the girl band era.
Right.
At least Tony Curtis did that. Anyway, it's not like what I'm saying. It's not like women jazz musicians haven't been around all this time, but it's definitely been a male-dominated world.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's neither here nor there as far as like living my life. I mean, I show up to a gig, I play the instrument. I never had anybody say to me that anything was wrong or,
That's because you play the hell out of the horn, ma'am.
Well, don't get me wrong. I have had, really incredible, I have stories. We could talk for another hour just about the stories the things people have said to me regarding my gender attached to my instrument that don't make any sense to us, but for some reason people, they need to do that. But it's the same thing when you get off a plane and you see a female pilot. Oftentimes you'll hear somebody behind you or in front of you say, wow, you sure did fly that plane really well for a woman, or you're a great female pilot, and you just don't, it's a well-meaning comment.
Sure.
Just not,
I definitely understand preconceptions.
Yeah.
Looking like I do, I'm actually Filipino German.
Yeah.
And living in Orange County, California,
Yeah.
As far as the majority of the population is concerned, I'm probably Mexican, or at least American Indian or something.
Yeah.
So I understand that.
Yeah.
My you speak well. It's
Yeah.
it's not unfortunately preconceived prejudices aren't exclusive.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
I had a very good friend, unfortunately, who was actually of Russian descent, who married a Hispanic girl, and they had kids that came out looking like me. And I married a Swede, and my kids came out looking like his. So we always joke that our kids got switched at the hospital.
That's great.
I just talk. What can I say?
Yeah.
It's been so nice to talk to you. Now, do you have any products for sale on the market? Do you have some albums or lesson plans, or can people contact you for lessons?
I do have an album. I lived in New York. I didn't get to this part yet, but I moved there to do my master's degree at Manhattan School of Music.
Ah.
And while I was there, 2001, September 11th happened. And so I ended up basically writing an entire album about sort of like my musical memoir of that day and the period of time after that day. And it's called Love Never Dies. And that was my debut solo jazz recording. And I haven't really put out another album, but I'm working feverishly on producing some other things right now. So I will keep you posted when more stuff comes out.
Now, was Love Never Dies, was that a quartet?
It's a quintet.
Okay.
Me, Mark Momas, who's a fabulous tenor sax player from Amsterdam, Chris Davis, who is getting like very notable piano player in the jazz scene. She's from Canada. And Jeff Davis, incredible drummer, originally from Colorado, I believe. I think he's in New York still now. Ivan Ofspik, who is a Norwegian bass player, incredible bass player. That's it. That's 5.
Oh.
Yeah, I also had Todd Eisler, who is an incredible percussionist, guesting on a couple of the tunes that involved some Middle Eastern percussion. So,
is my imagination, or has Canada been pumping out really brilliant women jazz players in the last 10 years?
They have, probably for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Diana Krall, and not to mention Bria, of course. A lot of really talented stuff coming out of there.
The Jensen sisters, Ingrid and Christine Jensen, are both incredible. Lena Alamano is another great trumpet player out of Canada. Yeah, really great. There's probably a gazillion more.
They need to stop that. No, I'm kidding. Well, Barbara, thank you so much for the interview. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Is your album available on any media?
Yeah, it's on iTunes and probably some others. It's on my website too.
And then, of course, there are the Diva recordings.
I'm on a bunch of Diva recordings, maybe 7 or 8 or 9, and I don't know if Conrad. I'm on. Big Butter Jazz Band has one out as well.
Well, I play with CJ I was playing with CJ every Friday.
I love CJ.
And I've been trying to get Conrad to do this interview, and for some reason I'm not getting a response. I hope I have the right email address.
Maybe you have the wrong email. We'll have to compare notes.
Well, let him know I'm after him if you talk to him.
Okay, I will.
And I have binged the YouTube videos of you guys, and great. I'm just I love your playing. Is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, thank you, Dan. I really appreciate it.
All right, Barbara. You take care now.
Thank you. My pleasure.
We'll talk to you later.
All right.
Thank you for watching Trad Jazz Today. Dan posts new interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Make sure to check out the archive of past shows, and please give us a thumbs up when you subscribe to the channel. Bye.